And president of Want Leverage Communications, and I'm back for another edition of PR Patter, my semi-weekly show where I chat with the amazing people from across my public relations and marketing network. And today is no different. I am so excited to have my colleague and friend Mike Bendit here. He is the founder and managing director of Software Development Resources, an independent business development agency for boutique software teams. His firm represents a dozen teams with a broad range of technical skills for building websites, e-commerce sites, mobile apps, Web3, and AI applications. Mike's teams are technically focused and frequently partner with marketing and creative agencies to deliver complete customized solutions that meet their clients' business, technical, and financial requirements. His teams also design and build custom applications for startups and small to medium sized businesses. So, welcome, Mike. It's great to see you.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
So, first, before we get into the topic, can you share a little bit about your backstory and how you even got into this field?
Absolutely. So I guess I've always been sort of a STEM, math head kind of kid when I
Oh,
was
we love
younger.
STEM.
Yeah, I was always good at math and science. I love science. I would say the humanities were more of a struggle for me. I still have nightmares about my AP English teacher from from high school.
And for me, it's the opposite.
There you go. Right. There's all right. All types make the world go round. So I studied. I went to I went to university and studied both business and engineering. I studied computer science engineering. I was fascinated by engineering, but wasn't sure I wanted to actually be an engineer, which is why I also studied business. I had this fascination with business and the flexibility and the world of business. Ended up with or finished with a dual degree in computer science and finance, and started my career off in the semiconductor industry in Japan, actually, working for a small producer of equipment used in the manufacturing of semiconductors, which are at the heart of computers. Those are the chips that go into your devices. And so I actually learned about computing from the ground up, so to speak. And I have since been on the business side of technology pretty much for my entire career. I worked for a big consulting firm. I've taken roles in strategy and marketing, always for tech. And in the after the dot com bust, I was laid off and figured I got to figure it out. I was in my early 40s and decided I would take advantage of my consulting background and start doing some consulting independently. And started working with tech firms. Ultimately, I had a client who had a small development shop, and I realized that the greatest thing I could do for him, the most value I could bring, was to bring him business. So I started selling on a commission basis with this team. Actually, the founder of the team was also an alum from my school at University of Pennsylvania. And it worked out well. The only limitation was that his team was somewhat limited in their capabilities. So I decided I wanted to
Huh.
add more teams. Since I was
Wow.
independent, it wasn't an exclusive arrangement either way. He was selling outside of my help, and I could sell other people's capabilities. And so I started expanding my group of teams that I represent,
How interesting. It's happened organically.
as things often do, right?
Yeah, that you're so right. You're so right. Um, so first, let's start by having you kind of explain about the world of apps and
Sure.
what it kind of encompasses.
Yeah. So uh, apps, of course, is short for application, and that is short for a software application typically. And first of all, let's talk about platforms, right? It used to be that you had these big computers and all of software ran on these big computers, then the personal computer and a lot of software. did and still does run on your personal computer, your Microsoft suite of products. So that's still a platform, but we've moved away from that largely because of the internet, right? The internet provided so much more ease of access. And so the web browser is a standard interface for building applications. Not everything happens in the browser. A lot of it happens in the back end on what we call a server. But it eliminated a lot of complexity around having to build from scratch this front end. You have this browser that's a universal tool. And now we also have mobile devices, smartphones. And smartphones you could use as a browser, right? Through you can, in fact, I think this application is probably working off of a browser. But then you also have native applications, the ones that you find, on your screen that you download from the App Store or Google Play. And those are now the two dominant platforms, the internet, so web applications, and mobile applications.
Right, because
So
we're all living on smartphones these days.
we're living on smartphones. I just actually wrote a blog about how Gen Z, uses I think it was social media and various social for searching for products more so than they use Google.
Right. I mean,
So
the most popular apps are, I think, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram.
yes, absolutely, particularly for searching for products.
Yeah.
So, if you want to build an app, the first thing you need to decide is where do I want this to show up? Do I want it to be a mobile app? Is my audience going to be using their mobile device primarily, or is it going to be more on a desktop or a laptop? In which case, you might want to consider, a web app or a browser-based application.
So I want to talk about the benefits of building an app, because from my perspective as a communications professional, there are incredible benefits to doing that because I see it as a relationship building tool. So maybe you can, embellish upon that a little bit, um, about how it really builds a relationship with the customer.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, eh, being a person who sells development services, uh, I want to warn people it's not easy, right? If you want to build something unique, it's it's a process. It's like saying, okay, I want to build a house, right? Um,
Sure.
there's a lot that goes into building a house. Maybe you should rent first. um, you really have to know why you're building an application, what you're trying to achieve. Um, it's uh, it's a complex process. Requires lots of thought, and having a very clear goal, what you want as to what you want to do with this application, is really important. And one thing I always do when I come up with what I think is a brilliant idea, I say somebody must have thought of this before. Right? It must be
Because
out there.
I can't possibly be that brilliant, right?
I can't be that. As smart as I think I am, somebody else has done it. And so do your research, right? If you think there should be an app to help you engage with your clients better, somebody's probably built something like that you can buy, right? That you can
So you
license.
can check it out and
You
see
can check it out,
what
right?
is great about it and what could be how you can improve upon it.
Exactly,
But it
exactly.
it is this direct means of communication with the customer that really can help you build brand awareness, brand credibility, and loyalty. And it can help you build like a seamless kind of experience for that customer that's going to keep
Absolutely.
them with you.
Absolutely. I would say, if you have a business where you're offering something unique and it's an ongoing relationship you're going to have with the customer, it's not a one-time sale. There is potential for using an app to build and maintain that relationship. Um, I'm thinking of, well, certainly an obvious example is an airline, right? If you are an airline and you have customers who are frequent flyers on your airline, United, Delta, whatever it happens to be. People can get tickets, they can check flight status, they can check in. All these things make it easier. They can get notifications.
They can even buy stuff,
They can, oh yeah,
right?
absolutely. They can even buy stuff. So if you want to engage with your customer and you think you can have them engage with you and you want to make that process easier, absolutely a mobile app, or a web-based app can help build and maintain that relationship.
When we were talking about having a direct pipeline to your target customer, one of the things that you mentioned was to kind of download an app that already exists, and that should probably be in your industry, because developing an app also helps you stay ahead of your competitors. If you develop something that's different than what they have, you're really elevating your brand.
Absolutely. There are certainly industries where maybe they're not so common. I have a little dog, and I take him to a vet that is actually a chain called Banfield, and they have an app, right? Now, that makes, because they're a chain, they're big, I think they're private equity owned, they have the advantage of having the resources to build an application to maintain that relationship with their customers and remind you of your puppy or your dog is up for a vaccination, whatever it happens to be, versus the neighborhood veterinarian who probably doesn't have, as a small office, doesn't have
Right.
those resources to do that. So that can be a real advantage, like you pointed out.
Now, do you have to be a designer to design an app?
You don't have to be a designer. You can always hire people. I strongly recommend that you work with professionals who can guide you before you even decide to, build an application. If you've done your homework and you said, I see there's a big gap in the market. I know what I want. I believe my customers want it. Maybe I've even done some market research to determine that my customers could use something like this. Then planning is so important, right? Again, like building a house, you're not just going to say, okay, build me a house. Where do I want this house to be? What do I want it to look like? How many rooms do I need? What is it going to provide for me and for my customers? So talking to somebody who can help you not only on the strategy side, but also on the technical side, if you're not technically savvy yourself, is going to be really helpful for you. You don't want to be spending money and going
Right.
down a path without that type of
Right.
expert
Absolutely.
guidance.
Upfront research is going to be a key element of the success of your app, I would imagine.
Like it is with almost anything that's complex, right?
Of course. So how do you choose the right development partner, Mike? I mean, there are so many things that go into having a solid relationship with an outside partner. What would you say are the top things that people should look for?
There are several things you want to look at. One is relevant experience. Has the team built something like this before? And let me take a step back. I said team. You could also go to a freelancer. I don't recommend it because a freelancer is usually one person, and I always say that the free is associated with their time. So if they decide to go skiing for 2 weeks or whatever,
Right.
or travel, they may not be available when you need them. So I recommend going with a team that is in business to do this and has resources, 5, 10, 20, 100 people that can help you through the whole process. Of course, if it's a 100-person team, it's going to be a subset of those people that are working with you. So go with a team, get recommendations. There are tools online if you don't have any friends who know anything about where to find a good application developer. There are directories online. And of course, that's what my positioning is, right? I have a dozen teams that I represent,
Right.
selected by me because I know they do good work. They've got a full range of capabilities, and I trust them. I have no obligation to work with any team. I'm completely independent. And my job is to select teams that I know will do right by my customers and have the right skill set depending on what the customer wants. So relevant experience. Another thing you need to look in is their cost structure. And most of
I
that
was
is
just going to
driven.
ask you about, a cost range to develop an app, or is there one? I guess each one
It's
is
sort
somewhat
of
different.
very different. It's again, it's like I liken it to building a house, right? Is this a small beach home, with 3 rooms, or is this a mansion, with
Right.
10 bathrooms and 40 rooms? That's extreme, of course, but the scope can vary tremendously. But when I say cost structure, I'm talking about the development team's cost structure, and that's driven mostly by the personnel, right? Where are they located? Are they an onshore team? U.S. teams tend to be cost at a minimum $150 an hour, usually $150 to $250 an hour per resource. You can go completely offshore to developing countries where you can get resources for as low as $20 an hour. And then there's the mix. There's what I call dual shore teams that have some resources here in the U.S., but most of their resources offshore. I think those tend to be the best value because you're getting a lot of the cost savings associated with those offshore resources, and yet your direct interaction is with the people here in the US for the most
Right.
part.
Right.
Um, and so the hourly is really what drives the cost. The hourly, and then of course, how many hours is this? How complex is it? What's it going to take to build it? And
What
there's
about
two.
what about what about communication with you know, the partner that you pick?
That's critical, and that's why I tend to recommend my dual shore teams usually, because you want somebody here in the U.S. or perhaps in North America, that you can communicate with well. Language is so important. Communication style is very important. Uh, it's complex enough to translate your business idea into a technical specification and then into an actual working app. Adding on top of that differences in language, culture, uh, time zone,
Right.
it adds layers and layers of complexity, and you want to reduce complexity as much as possible. So if you want to take advantage of some offshore cost savings, you need to be aware of potential challenges of going directly offshore. If you've done it before and you understand what it takes and are willing to deal with those problems, you know, then all the power to you. But if you want to alleviate some of those issues, then working perhaps with a dual shore team or a domestic team, of course, but a domestic team is going to cost you a lot more.
Right. So how can you project that or how do you know that your app is successful?
Well, I recommend taking it one step at a time, right? Ultimately, usually a first product we call a minimum viable product. So you don't want to build all the bells and whistles into your product before it's proven itself. So you want to define what do I need to be successful at a minimum so that I can get out there and see if this is going to work. And so defining that minimum viable product is critical. And even before then, if you've got a novel idea that may have some technical challenges associated with it, you're going to want to do a proof of concept. Don't spend your money until you've proven the most difficult technical
That's so
aspects.
important. That's really important.
Right. And it can be a limitation of the technology. For example, if you decided that you want to build this on another platform that uses apps or provides apps like won't say an open source platform, but a platform that provides access for apps to be built on, and you want to build an app, there's always going to be restrictions and limitations. So you want to make sure that you test those limitations and restrictions beforehand. Or, of course, if it's something that's using AI or something pushing the edge of technology, you want to test it out. Do I have the resources available to me? Can I make this thing work? What can I do without spending a ton of money to figure out, to prove the concept that, yeah, we can do this or we can't?
Yeah, no, I think those are all really, really important tips. And I mean, all of these things cost. So you want to
Yeah,
make sure that you keep that at those extra costs at a minimum.
yeah. And you asked me so specifically, what does an app cost? You could probably, if you use an offshore resource to build a very simple mobile app, I guess you could probably do it for, you know, as low as $5,000, although I'm a little hesitant to even say that. And then the sky's the limit, right? You could spend millions of
Right.
dollars to
Sure.
build a sophisticated app. But don't count on $5,000. That's very simple. That's offshore resources. And if we're talking about a mobile app specifically, if you're in a different world, if you're talking about a website or something as simple as that, even a simple e-commerce site, under $10,000 is very doable. Because there's infrastructure, right? You've got platforms like WordPress and Shopify, things that make it easier to create
Sure.
applications. In this case, the web applications that have been out there before. They're not that unique. Your design is unique, your approach is unique, your
Sure.
products are unique, but the technology is not.
Well, Mike, this has been a great conversation. I learned a lot. And next time I look to develop an app, I know where to go for my information.
Yeah,
We
listen, my background, I'm a consultant at heart. I want to do what's right for the client. I'm happy to share my expertise. I really appreciate your having me.
Well, you're like my resource for everything. So beyond apps, you've just become that. It's amazing. But anyway, thank you so much for being here today. Everyone else, if you'd like, you go to my website at wantleverage.com and download Make Your C-Suite Stand Out on LinkedIn. And I'll see you next time on another